two, three. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Oh, it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Hey!
This is the
WBRN Radio presents, via the Boston Red Network, the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 3rd of February, 2020. Important notes today. Later today, the all-awaited Iowa caucuses will be at 7 o'clock Central Time in the Midwest state of Iowa. But first, lead with the news that's made headlines. It's been all over the BBC. The American Super Bowl, which we boycotted, but nonetheless, it was a very interesting Super Bowl. The betting pundits put their spread at 1.5 there in terms of scoring, and they estimated that 100 million people in North America watched, at least at the start of the game. Super Bowls in North America, particularly in the U.S., are party affairs that many people gather prior to it in private homes, saloons, etc. And they do their quote-unquote what they call tailgating type activities before the game and during the early moments of the game, and up to and including the halftime show, which J-Lo put on. It was in the city of, or outside actually of Miami. It was in Miami Gardens, the hometown of none other than the late Trayvon Martin. What the show there was, the Kansas City Chiefs, which were slightly favored, and we usually sorry about it using the word Chiefs, but anyway, nonetheless, Kansas City, the longtime coach, was the last time Kansas City was there, was Hank Stram. And the owner of Kansas City, the late Lamar Hunt, they now have the Lamar Hunt trophy. And up and through halftime, the score evidently was 20-10 in favor of San Francisco. And that score stood until the fourth quarter of the game, and then Mr. Mahomes did what he normally does, brought his team back, and within 4 minutes scored 3 touchdowns. That's 21 points unanswered. With the help of the defense, I think we reviewed an article in the Washington Post talking about what Kansas City had done in terms of improving its defense. There are many urban legends out there by people that are fans of the NFC, the what was called the National Football League, NFC at the time, and it merged with the American Football Conference, of which Kansas City is in. And of course, the Boston team, the Patriots, are in that conference also. And back to the urban legend that the NFC had a better defense, and they were citing what happened in the game between San Francisco and Green Bay. These were the same comics that literally had the game in Green Bay. They didn't know where the game was. What happens many times in America, that people that talk about these various sporting games virtually never watch them. Some of them watch a few minutes at the start, a few minutes through the second quarter, and those that watch halftime and those that don't, and come back and look at third quarter, and if it's a 20-10, the channel changing starts. And with hundreds of cable stations, Many of these people were not there for the last 4 minutes of the game. In American football, there is the proverbial 2-minute warning, but by that time, Mr. Mahomes had went to work. And within 4 minutes, and with the 2-minute warning is kind of a timeout, scored 21 points. What that basically tells you is the San Francisco defense was out to lunch, tired out. I had not checked to see exactly where they were, but it had been a 50-year drought there in Kansas City. The team is, of course, located at Arrowhead Stadium. I believe it's still Arrowhead Stadium, and that is on the Missouri side. The Kansas City, we used to organize there for a trade union, and nonetheless it's divided between the Kansas side, which is Kansas City, Kansas, and the Missouri side, which is Kansas City, Missouri, which is the larger part. And outside of the Missouri is Independence. That was the home of none other than Harry S. Truman. So Missouri did, in fact, have a president at one time, period. Illinois, if I, off the top of my head, had two, Abraham Lincoln and Barack Obama. A little bit of presidential history here. But that's in a very close proximity of Iowa. Iowa, of course, it borders Missouri, and that is a team, depending obviously on what part of Iowa you're in, would be tuned into Kansas City, as their television network covers that area, particularly the Quad Cities, those areas. And of course, again, because of Iowa's position, some of those people would be Green Bay fans. A little bit about the football culture of America and where it is. But a bigger issue out there, I was talking with this fellow from Lagos a week and a half ago about quarterbacks in the NFL and the plight of Colin Kaepernick and his taking a knee and how that impacts social justice, sort of like what happened at the Olympics many years back there when the Olympians put up the clenched fist, Mr. John Carlos, etc. But activism has been a part of U.S. Sport and will continue to be a part of U.S. sport. That is to drive home. But in the NFL, with their plantation system, there are very few African American quarterbacks, and many teams, when Colin Kaepernick was available, would not sign Colin Kaepernick and would not sign another African American quarterback, and they suffered because of that, because of the kinds of skills that Mr. Mahomes has to scramble and also to throw. He can go downfield. Very few can do that, sort of like the former Denver quarterback, John Elway. John Elway could literally lie on his stomach and at the 30 or 40 yard line, or even back of that, and throw literally almost to the end zone. That's a very strong arm. One of the strong arm quarterbacks. Remember the Washington team, when they had a team in D.C., Doug Williams, an outstanding African American quarterback that won a Super Bowl for Washington, and then they put him as a so-so quarterback the next year, and finally traded him, which ended his career. He ended up as a coach at Grambling University. So that sort of tells you the built-in institutional racism in the NFL. And that's the reason that we boycotted it. And more in African American communities, especially amongst young African Americans, you see the mentality that the NFL is not the ticket, period. At one time, baseball was a ticket during Jackie Robinson's time, but that has changed for African American ball players. Now, there are Latino ball players. Most of those are from outside of the U.S., Cuba, etc., even Venezuela, that are playing in a Major League Baseball. And that leaves the national NBA, which Kobe Bryant was a part of, the late great Kobe Bryant was a part of. And the NBA has a more human-like face. Players there can voice their opinions in the NBA. And they also have a pension system in line is much more human. The NFL is trying to redo their pension system. I believe they finally at least put it more human there. Jim Brown was talking about that. Basically what they had for many players that played when Jim Brown played and when the late great Hank Graham coached in Kansas City 50 years ago, the last time they won anything, was roughly about $300 a month was the standard minimum pension. That was when players in the NFL did not have multi-million-dollar quarterback contracts. Most players there were lucky to get several $1,000 a year, and they worked other jobs in the off season. Period. But all that has changed now. And now they brought evidently their pension system up to the minimum that a modern time player could receive. That way players, Jim Brown was talking about, and it's in one of our shows, was talking about that one individual was in Florida living in a mobile park and couldn't afford dentures. So in other words, this is the sheer poverty that happens in a plantation type of system, and that goes on in the NFL. Anyway, that's enough about our NFL story. The impeachment that is going on. There's the closing arguments today, Monday, in Washington. So the senators that are on the campaign trail were Bernie Sanders, Liz Warren, and Amy Klobuchar will be back in the Senate. And those arguments will go on. They will also go on Tuesday, where senators will have an opportunity to do that, and up until 1,400 hours. Let's see, 1,600 hours on Monday. That's 4 o'clock Eastern Time. They will anticipate taking a vote whether or not to formally impeach DJ Trump. Period. The money is that they will acquit him because they will need 17 votes from Republicans. They have to get 2/3 of it, 67 votes. The Democrats don't have it. So we'll have some more of those amazing, 47 to 52 votes. I get my cheat sheet out here. It's not here, but anyway, you get basically what it was. They fell short. Will all the Democrats vote to impeach DJ Trump? Well, from a practical political standpoint, you know you're going to lose a vote. If Senator Manchin out of West Virginia, if he votes against it, well, so what? And so what for Doug Jones? Would it materially affect Doug Jones's race in Alabama? Probably not. It may be a couple of points. If it's a close race, it perhaps would help Jones out, and maybe not. As far as the Republican senators are concerned, the only one really would benefit from voting there would be Susan Collins. Would she vote? That's up in the air. We know now that the others, McCoskey out of Alaska, would not vote to impeach, and many others have said basically the same rationale there. What Willard Romney would do, I don't know. Willard Romney just got reelected. He's, of course, former governor of the Commonwealth, and loved in Utah, where DJ Trump is not well liked. So we'll see how that particular situation goes. Back to Iowa. Iowa's a very interesting situation. One of the former outstanding columnists for the Des Moines Register, Mr. Yepsen used to say that there were 3 tickets out of Iowa. That's somewhat changed. Last year there was 1/10, 2/10 difference between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. And basically, depending on how the quote-unquote arithmetic was done, many were of the opinion that Bernie Sanders won the Iowa caucuses. But as far as delegates, they ended up about the same. It's a process based on the old New England meeting, that in certain corners of the room go Bernie's people, another corner goes Elizabeth Warren's people, Joe Lunchbox Biden, little Petey, and any others, I suppose, that are there, Liz Warren. And any candidate doesn't get 15% on the first go-around, they will have a second go-around, and some people will be eliminated from the tally in that precinct, that is. And so second choice is very important. It is fluctuating in flux this year, according to various interviews. Iowa is sort of like that. Could there be a surprise winner in Iowa? Perhaps. That is the organization. We do know that Bernie ran there last time around, so he has an organization in Iowa. Elizabeth Warren has been there. She has an organization in Iowa. Amy Klobuchar has been traveling around the state and trying to build an organization. Is it little too late? Well, we'll get the analysis on that. And little Petey and his Petey bus have been driving around Iowa, larger crowds that he had, I think, outside of Des Moines. Anyway, a lot of them have stuck around Des Moines, that area, and others have fanned out across Iowa. And you would also expect Joe Lunchbox Biden, because he has the support of many of the quote-unquote insiders, Democrats in Iowa, they'll be able to get people out. But their ability to turn people out is going to be very interesting. So then we get back to a question, a large turnout. Many of the pundits and posters and even the Democratic Party in Iowa have the position that the turnout will be much more. That means 200,000 plus people will turn out. And Bernie, in his closing argument, was saying, and many people will stand by that, the greater the turnout, the better possibility he has of winning. If you look at Joe Lunchbox Biden, his people, at least on the first ballot, are more or less there. How would a large turnout help Liz Warren? Very difficult to say there. She's been behind in a lot of the polls, but the polls themselves have a lot of undecided people there. And on top of that, the Cadillac of polls are the standard Des Moines registry. They were going to unveil it on CNN, a commercial network. Didn't happen. Now I'm looking at something from the Hill here. They talk about a coding error that caused the problem. They had a rotating name basis. Another situation came out that the fonts themselves. Now we've had trouble with fonts that cut off the screen and cut off little Petey's name from it. But was it more insidious than cutting off? We don't know at this point in time. Somebody reported to the Buttigieg campaign that his name was not there. He evidently complained loudly, and they decided, and Saucer decided that they would abandon it, the last poll from them. So that poll is not there. Eventually, perhaps it will leak, and we'll know who was ahead in that poll. There had been jockeying of positions. Some polls had Bernie Sanders ahead by as much as 5. That would be out of the margin of error. Other polls showed one outliner there, Joe Lunchbox Biden ahead. And some other polls showed him neck and neck, 1 percentage points. So that in itself is a very difficult situation to project. So that's why very few people, we projected here at WBRN Radio, we projected hung parliaments before and various other situations, campaigns where people won by 5 votes, but those were campaigns. Those were not caucuses that you basically go through a various process. So we won't attempt on this one, not that we are scared to predict? No, we're not that. Let me get back here. Minnesota Teacher of the Year. She does kneel during the college football championship. A very brave woman. She was Minnesota's top teacher. Said her students were on her mind when she decided to kneel during the national anthem honored at Monday night's college football championship. Now, this is a little bit old. This is the NCAA championship. She was the state's 2019 Teacher of the Year. Kelly Holstein took a knee while being recognized as a Mercedes-Benz on the Mercedes-Benz Super Bowl field, along with other honored teachers. Standing with them was DJ Trump himself. I just decided that it felt the right thing to do a very special, respectful protest. Holstein told The Hill. It's really Dr. Martin Luther King says it's best. Nobody is free until we all are free. Holstein had protested early this year by skipping the White House ceremony recognizing the Teacher of the Year honoree. That was back in April. And also Jessica Duan, I suppose, the Kentucky honoree, also skipped the ceremony with Trump. Trump's presidency made Holstein more apt to stand up for the community, she said, are opposed under this administration. Honored as the state teacher of the year at the NCAA champion game, given a platform to stand up for the marginalized and oppressed people like many before. I respectfully knelt during the national anthem because no one is free until we all are. That is a tweet sent out here by Kelly Holstein. She called herself. I think the current administration is being created and has been created in this in his tenure definitely adds to my feeling of wanting to support individuals who are not being supported, she said. I really feel like our country is not being served, is not serving the needs of all its inhabitants. So many human rights now that are being given the respect and the rights that they deserve. Educators said she found out that Trump would be on the field with the teachers ahead of her decision to kneel. She said the honorees were told they could place their hands on their hearts, as is traditionally done, are not doing so during the national anthem. The guidance made Holstein start to consider if standing without placing her hand on her heart was enough to support the people she wanted to support. After consulting with other educators and her wife, Holstein said that she decided to kneel. Holstein said not everyone around realized her silent protest was happening. Those who did were very supportive. She stressed that there are many approaches and strategies people take to stand up for others and respect the choices educators standing beside her made during the game. While she was kneeling on the field, Holstein said she was thinking about the students and other youth she worked with for 25 years. Not everyone is given the opportunity to have a voice. I can take a small moment, a respectful moment of protest, and exercise my First Amendment rights and stand up for my students and for vulnerable adults and for people who are not treated in the way they should be. She said it feels like it's my responsibility to do it. She had previously worked at an alternative high school in Minnesota that helped design and open. She helped design and open. She's now Director of Education Equality for Outfront Minnesota, an LGBTQ plus advocacy group, and released a TED Talk on Friday discussing why she feels educators should be advocates. This is a very, very good, and it does blend in to our theme and our position on the NFL and professional football and their treatment of Colin Kaepernick, and it goes on with why he took a kneel. Very, very important. She did that in the middle of the field, and old DJ Trump was standing right by her. We have to emphasize that again. All power to Kelly Holstein. Miss Holstein did what she needed to do. Let me just move along here a little bit. Incidentally, we will have a Numbers Man report. A Numbers Man report we do weekly here at WBRN and over the Boston Red Network. And we will, we will have that. And today in China we'll have coronavirus. The death toll, I believe, is 366. And the number of infected passed 14,000 around the world. And in China, various airliners are no longer flying to China. And people have been evacuated. Those that come to the U.S. are put under 2-week quarantine. And others are, depending on the severity of their illness, are put onto home quarantines, and they're checked by medical personnel. So that's one of the things that is happening out of this coronavirus. And also in China, in Wuhan area there, the authorities have built the hospital within 2 weeks, and now medical personnel of Red Army are there. So they are really moving on that. They're not messing around at all on that particular situation. Let me just take one little look back at the polls here. So these are Iowa polls, so we can get a little bit straight what is happening today. We commented on Friday Jobber and also on the week that it was about these polls. We won't go into those, but what we will do is on just the Iowa polls, we'll talk a little bit about it and where we are with it, the various ones out of Iowa. Now let's see, these were on Friday. I don't have anything out of Iowa here. On Thursday, let's see, Pennsylvania. No. So we have to go back to Wednesday. We have a Mama poll here. Very, very close race here. It had Joe Biden at 23, Bernie Sanders at 21, Little Petey at 16, Warren at 15. You see how they're bunched up here, and Amy Klobuchar. The Iowa State University has Bernie up by 5, 24 there, and then we have Warren at Little Petey at 17, Amy Klobuchar at 11. Little different poll here out of Iowa State. So we look at those two polls, little difference between them. One has Biden leading by 2, the other Bernie Sanders by 2. Iowa State polls are usually fairly accurate in Iowa. It's the only Iowa poll we have here. Now the one registered did not show up. We have an Emerson poll out of Iowa, has Bernie way up at 9. He's 30 to 21 over Biden, and then Buttigieg at 10, Warren at 11. Amy Klobuchar is actually ahead of Warren. When we look at this, there's a great possibility, and Amy Klobuchar's evidently stratagem is to work the rural areas, a lot of Republican areas, get people out. This would be more in the turnout of plus 200,000. If she works out, this works out for her, she could indeed get one of the 3 tickets out of Iowa, as Mr. Yepsen was talking about there. What Joe Biden is able to do in the rural areas, he's working the older population, but there's a lot of young people out there, and Bernie Sanders is working young people. He's working Latinos, African Americans, people that have not been worked before. Now we do have a USA Today poll, I forgot about that. Now this one has Biden up by 6, and then Bernie and Mayor Petey pretty much together, and then comes Warren. That USA Today poll, I'm not certain about it. We don't know at this point in time where it is. Let me just quick see if we can even find the Iowa State particular poll here. Got a number of these polls listed. The Iowa State poll here is Iowa State. I'm not sure. We probably have it some things we do get and some things we do not. We are not going to have. One other question here: will case out in Minnesota involving Mr. Burrell? He was a person evidently sentenced, and for a crime he didn't commit, was part of talking points of Amy Klobuchar. Will that have any effect? Probably will not have any effect in Iowa. We look at it as a more of a long-term effect situation, perhaps. We're going to take a little break here, and then we'll come back, and we'll hear a little bit from Charlie Cook. This is WBRN Radio. Charlie Cook writing before, on the 28th of January, his Cook Report. The picture to remain cloudy after Iowa and New Hampshire. Gazing into the crystal ball for clues into the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination contest would likely reveal an exceedingly murky picture. To begin with, it's difficult to predict what will happen in Iowa. That's today, on the 3rd, or the February the 11th in New Hampshire. We know that every contest nominee since 72 have gone to a candidate that finished first, second, or third in Iowa, then Iowa first, second in New Hampshire. We know that the last 4 Democratic nominees have gone on to win the Iowa caucuses. Theoretically, at least, that means in the next 3 weeks the race should be down to 2 viable candidates. But considering that 4 Democrats have claimed first place in Iowa polls in the last 4 weeks, and the same 4 have each been in first place in New Hampshire over the last 4 months, maybe it's time to throw out the traditional yardstick. And a lot of people have talked about this. He's not the first, using again the Real Clear Politics poll average, recent gaps between Joe Lunchbox Biden, first place showing of 21%, Buttigieg's fourth place tally of 16.3 is just 4.7 percentage points. Bernie Sanders with 17.3 and Elizabeth Warren with 16.7 are between. Using the gold standard, Des Moines Registry CNN, that's and Salsa there. Bernie Sanders actually sits in first place with 20%, followed by Elizabeth Warren at 17, Buttigieg at 16, and Joe Biden in third place. Now, this is very, very interesting here, and turnout could change much of people here. A 5-point spread between the 4. New Hampshire, again, and we're looking at the Real Clear Politics spread between first place Sanders at 21.6 and fourth place Warren at 14 is a somewhat wider, 7.6 there, with Biden second with 17.6, Buttigieg with 14.8. There's no gold standard poll in the Granite State, but Sanders has outpaced the field in 3 of 5 polls conducted this year, with Joe Lunchbox Biden and Mayor Petey each coming out on top in another. Now, this is kind of interesting here from polling. Corresponding all this uncertainty is that with the states using proportional representation on the Democratic side, Republicans have, of course, a winner-take-all. I like that one better. We may see very little difference in the delegate haul of the top 4 candidates coming out of the 2 contests. In other words, muddled. The likelihood of a candidate coming out of these 2 with a lot of momentum is not high. We agree with Charlie on that one. Now let's factor in 2 intangibles. Polling very clearly shows electability is a very big factor in the majority of Democratic voters' decision-making process this year. A byproduct, the level of laughing that party regulars have for President Trump. For now, Biden is a clear beneficiary of the electability argument. In fact, electability represents at least 2, if not 3, of the 4 legs holding Biden's candidacy up. If he were to do or say something to jeopardize the perception of electability, his candidacy could collapse like a house of cards. Well, that could happen, but that will not happen. Another trouble spot for Biden, of course, is fundraising. No doubt about that. Political pros say the ante for the 14 Super Tuesday states alone is $100 million. A real challenge for any of the 4 candidates, but especially for Biden, who's got less cash than his rivals. Now, another thing will come in here will be Bloomberg. Let me finish this up. Here's where I depart from conventional wisdom the most. We're going to see 2, 3, or 4 candidates emerge from the first 4 states, none with meaningful delegate leads or momentum heading into Super Tuesday. Most importantly, none of the candidates, say perhaps Sanders, will have enough money, much money at all. This column has suggested before, but my gut tells me to watch Mr. Bloomberg. But a whole column itself, watch for the next weeks. But take note, new CNN poll release, which shows Biden and Bloomberg beating Trump by 9 points nationwide. Sanders could win by 7, Warren by 5, Little Petey by 4, Amy Klobuchar by 3. I think Amy Klobuchar could actually do better than that. Only a lunatic would try to predict a Democratic nominee under these circumstances. I certainly wouldn't. But putting me down for Biden with 50% chance, Bloomberg with 25% chance, and with 25% split between Sanders and Warren, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, and who in the heck else. Now, this is kind of interesting. He's giving 50% to Joe Lunchbox Biden, 25% to Michael Bloomberg, and the rest get 25% all put together. Now, it'll be interesting there where Elizabeth Warren goes. Will the money keep coming in? Little Petey is trying to beg and borrow to keep his bus rolling. Amy Klobuchar has enough money because of new endorsement with the New York Times, and also endorsement there in New Hampshire, William Loeb's newspaper, the Manchester paper there. So those are some things that are bringing money into her that will keep her into Super Tuesday. But how any of these candidates do out there, they've got to go through California and all these other states. She has Minnesota up there, but how will she do in Minnesota? Well, that's up there. And how will Biden do? Biden is not doing as well in California these days. How will he do in Nevada? And then in South Carolina, the other candidates are starting to catch up a little bit there. Now, Bloomberg, he's running around all over the place. He's got his Greenwood program. He was on the historic Greenwood section of Tulsa, a political stunt there, no doubt about it. And he is, trying to appeal to African Americans, at least to pretend he is. And he will find some. He found, who is it out of Chicago there? The representative there in Chicago, and he has the mayor, an African-American London breed, out of San Francisco. He got the former mayor out of Los Angeles, Antonio Vasalara, out of L.A. I'm not sure what he can bring with Latinos. He doesn't have that much sway with Latinos. But this that was this Bobby, what's his name, out of Chicago there. Used to be in the Black Panther Party. Anyway, he was literally the only one to defeat Barack Obama. That was when Barack Obama was running the congressional seat there, Bobby Rush. He's also a minister. So, in other words, what Bloomberg will do in the African American community is he will run a situation very similar to what DJ Trump, but with a lot more success. He's got money to buy these characters off with these minister types and various others that you would assume that would jump on his bandwagon. So that makes it very interesting for Bloomberg, who is 77 years old. But the problem is with the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, talking to a professor the other night, about a possible split there. Many of us progressives would never vote for Bloomberg. The question of Joe Biden holding the nose or not is a very big question there. What would do with Joe Biden? It depends on how Bernie is treated here. But as the professor was saying, basically why Bloomberg came into the race is to stop Bernie Sanders. Now, if Bernie gets one of those tickets out of Iowa, one of the free Yepsen-type tickets, there's big problems for these characters, and does well in New Hampshire. We expect him to do well in New Hampshire. But how Joe Biden does, well, we'll be back with you probably at this time tomorrow night. Maybe we'll take a day to sum all this up and get everything squared away properly and analyze what happened in Iowa. A little harder with the caucus and get ready for New Hampshire coming up. So this is interesting with Charlie Cook here. with Joe Biden. Yeah, I would say Joe Biden has a good chance to perform, but reservation we have at this mic about Joe Biden, can he turn the people out? Now, also remember now, we've been around Iowa since 1972. We started out with George McGovern. Iowa is more conservative now than in the past. Barack Obama did well there. We have the people there. Well, if Barack Obama could do well, he came from Illinois. Why not an Amy Klobuchar? Basically, she's an Eisenhower Republican too. The possibility there. But then you have this Mayor Peavy there that's a younger person, appeals to some people. He's to the right of these other characters in the race here. Liz Warren, put the gender card in there. How would she do? But the problem with any of these candidates as they leave Iowa and New Hampshire, will they simply be able to get enough money to go into Super Tuesday? That's going to be a hard thing. Bernie has got his. Buttigieg is suffering. He may be riding a bicycle before it's over. Amy will make it at least to Super Tuesday there. And, of course, Bloomberg is already trying to buy up Super Tuesday. But how far will his message go when they actually get on the debate stage and start talking about stop and frisk and some of his other programs? That'll be very, very interesting, and he has pledged to spend more than $100 million on his campaign. In other words, he has resources that he would be able to spend more than Republicans and DJ Trump combined. Yes, you can sell a message doing that. There's no doubt about that. And with DJ Trump's message, he could very well present a quote-unquote moderated message there. Period. Now, when you look at the numbers that Charlie cited here, Bloomberg beating Trump by 9 points. That makes Trump nervous. No doubt about that. And Biden, well, he's nervous enough about Biden to put himself in an impeachment situation, working class Joe Biden. But then he's up against a billionaire. That clouds things up. There's no doubt about that. But Bernie Sanders also has shown the ability to win in places like West Virginia. Bernie, and that's going to be interesting in Iowa to see how the turnout for Bernie is in terms of, we know young people will be turning out in great numbers in terms of Latinos, what few African Americans are around Iowa. And in the rural areas and the working class areas, if Bernie turns those people out, he will be out of Iowa on one of those 3 tickets. Nonetheless, this is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth on the 3rd of February, which is Caucus Day in Iowa. Incidentally, Patsawali Phil did not see his shadow, so in other words, a shorter spring for those believers in Patsawali Phil. We probably need to have him forecast some of these races here along with the crystal ball. Ours is the Ouija board. We did well, however, on the Super Bowl. We got that one right. Iowa, a little bit a situation there. Now, Bloomberg's not in Iowa. I think I would take a look at what Liz Warren does there. If Liz Warren doesn't make one of the 3 seats there, she will be having problems. Where Buttigieg falls there. And basically the top 5 where Amy Klobuchar falls. If Amy Klobuchar by hook or crook can outdistance Buttigieg, you never know. I mean, there can be, if you can put together enough of the rural votes, Republican area votes on a turnout, especially the way this thing is set up, you could pull something off.